SANDHAN, All Gujarat Integrated Classroom.
સેટેલાઇટના માધ્યમથી જોડતી કડી એટલે સંધાન.
Welcome friend. Today I would like to deliver my lecture on Victorian novelist. Queen Victoria was a famous queen of England and her period is from 1819 to 1901, and during her regime the literature that grew and that is known as Victorian literature. And in the history of English literature, this period of Queen Victoria is known as the Victorian Age. And during this age, Victorian novelist is a major part of English literature. Queen Victoria's period from 1830 to 1880 is known as Victorian literature in the history of English literature. Among all the forms of literature, the novel dominates the Victorian period. The chief novelists of the Victorian period are Charles Dickens, 1812 to 1870. Next is W.H. Thackeray, 1811 to 1863. Bronte sisters, and there are three sisters: Charlotte Bronte, 1816 from 55, then Emily Bronte, 1818 to 1848, and third Annie, 1820 to 1849. Then we have George Eliot, 1819 to 1880. Next, Meredith, 1828 to 1909. Thomas Hardy, 1791 to 1885. Then Robert Stevenson, 1850 to 1894. Then Benjamin Disraeli, 1804 to 1881. Charles Kingsley, 1819 to 1875. Elizabeth Gaskell, 1810 to 1865, and Wilkie Collins, 1824 to 1889. So these are the chief novelists of the Victorian period. Now let us look at the chief characteristics of the Victorian novel. Before we take the individual Victorian novelists, let us look at some of the chief features or characteristics of the Victorian novelist. The first characteristic is Industrial Revolution. Victorian age gave birth to Industrial Revolution. The result of the steam engine of James Watt played an important part in the mass production of industries. More cloth mills emerged and the city grew fast. The industries were in need of workers and laborers. The new class consciousness developed among the people. The society divided into two classes, the rich and the poor. As a result, the industrial novel emerged. It is linked to the social problem novel in the Victorian age. Charles Dickens described the pathetic conditions of the workers in his novel Hard Times, which was published in 1854. Other important writers who describe the social problems are Benjamin Disraeli, and his famous work is Sibyl, 1845. And another important novelist is Mrs. Elizabeth Gaskell, and her works are Mary Barton, 1848, and North and South 1855. The major themes that we find in these writers' works are exploitations of the factory workers, urban poverty, and rural migrations. Next important characteristics is child labor. Another important feature is the child labor. Children were expected to help to support their families. They often worked long hours in the dangerous and filthy factories. They were paid little wages. Charles Dickens has beautifully described the child labor and the child's pathetic condition in his famous novel Oliver Twist that was published in 1838. Another important characteristic is the new education. This is also an important feature of Victorian age. The Victorians came up with the idea that all children should go to school. They introduced laws saying what you could and could not expect children to do. Next one is intellectual development. Intellectuals' development played a major part in the development of the Victorian novels. Darwin's Origin of Species, that was first published in 1859, has revolutionized the foundation of scientific thought. The first electric train was invented by a German in 1879. Now, first we come to the first novelist, that is Charles Dickens, 1812 to 1870. Dickens is one of the best novelists of the Victorian age. He has written number of novels. Among his famous works are The Pickwick Papers, 1836, A Christmas Carol, published in 1843, Dombey and Son, published in 1846, David Copperfield, 1849, Hard Times, 1854, Bleak House, 1852, Oliver Twist, Tale of Two Cities, 1859, and Great Expectations, 1860. Dickens is known as a social reformer. His works do not show any systematic social or political theory. Dickens, through his novels, aroused public interest in many of the evils of his day. The evils of boarding schools in Nicholas Nickleby, 1838. The evils of the work houses in Oliver Twist. The hero of this novel is a poor child. He is an unfortunate victim of society. The pathos and the poverty that Oliver endures is very pathetic and touching. Now, if we look at the characters in the novels of Charles Dickens and especially Oliver Twist, the characters in the novels of Dickens are of different types. First is the innocent little child like Oliver, Joe, Paul, Tiny Tim, and Little Neil. Here, if we look at the character of Oliver Twist from the work and the film Oliver, the picture itself makes very clear the very pathetic condition of a child Oliver during the time of Charles Dickens. Second type of character is the horrible, like Squeers, Fagin the Jew, Quilp, Uriah Heep, and Bill Sykes. So here, if we look at the picture of the character that is Uriah Heep from his famous work David Copperfield, immediately we recognize that the photograph itself shows the very horrible look of the character. And then we find the third type of character is the humorous fellow like Mr. Micawber and Sam Weller. Here is the character of Mr. Micawber from the works of Charles Dickens. And the fourth type of the character is the powerfully drawn figures like Lady Dedlock of Bleak House and Sidney Carton of A Tale of Two Cities. Dickens's novel belongs to the class of purpose or the problem novels. In the Bleak House, we find attacks on the law's delays, the injustice which persecutes poor debtors is found in Little Dorrit. The abuses of charity schools and brutal school masters in Nicholas Nickleby. The suffering of the poor in English workhouses is depicted in Oliver Twist. Charles Dickens wrote his novels with a serious purpose to make the novel the instruments of morality and justice. His aim was to correct the general selfishness and injustice of society towards the poor. He emphasizes the fact that this is an excellent world. Some errors have crept into it, but they can be easily remedied by a little human sympathy. As a novelist, Dickens holds a very popular and successful novelist in Victorian age. Next to Dickens is William Makepeace Thackeray, and his period is from 1811 to 1863. Another important novelist is W.M. Thackeray. He is known for his best novel, The Vanity Fair. It was serialized from 1847 to 1848. In this novel, the genius of Thackeray reaches high watermark. The central character of the novel is Becky Sharp, an adventuress. In Vanity Fair, Thackeray describes high society in his own day. Thackeray describes this work a novel without a hero. The action of the novel revolves around two women. Number one is Amelia. She is a meek creature of the milk and the water type. And second character is Becky Sharp. She is very sharp and unprincipled intriguer. If we look at the photograph of Becky Sharp, her features reminds that how clever she is. His another important works are Henry Esmond, 1852. Pendennis, another work that is published in 1849-50. Newcomes, 1855. The Virginians, 1859. So these are the important works of Thackeray. Henry Esmond is his most perfect novel. The hero, Colonel Esmond, relates his own story through the courts and camps of Queen Anne's reign. The reader is carried away into the past age. Thackeray is a realist, and he has an extraordinary knowledge of 15th century literature, 18th century literature. He presents the brutality and barbarism with pride and pomp of war in a very realistic manner. Thackeray is first of all a realist. He paints life as he sees it. He says himself, I quote, I have no brains above my eyes, unquote. I describe what I see. Thackeray is a master of pure and simple English style. He expresses his thought perfectly without any effect or affectation. We find a subtle charm in his work that gives us the impression that we are listening to a gentleman. Then we come to the next important writers, and they are Bronte sisters. Number 1 is Charlotte Bronte, 1816 to 1855. Next is Emily Bronte. Her period is from 1818 to 1848. And third one is Annie, 1820 to 1849. Without the mention of Bronte sisters, Victorian age is incomplete. Bronte sisters, through their contribution, have enriched the Victorian novels to a great height. If we look at the two photographs, one is of Charlotte Bronte, became famous through her masterpiece work Jane Eyre, 1847. Here in the slide, we can see the two photographs of the Bronte sisters' work. First we have taken Charlotte Bronte, and this is her photograph, and second photograph is taken from